They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis. Welcome everyone to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. I'm your host, Brittany Ming, and today we're talking to Mariah Duck. Mariah is a dedicated mother, military wife and spouse, and social worker with extensive experience in the ART/IVF field in several capacities, but is currently a surrogacy case manager. She is also a passionate advocate for all things birth and postpartum, working as a doula and having been a surrogate herself. Her unique perspective blends professional expertise with personal experience, making her a powerful voice on caregiving, resilience, and community support. So welcome, Mariah. I'm so happy to have you on today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
So quick story on us. You were my doula for
Yes.
Grace's birth. She is my youngest child, and I gave birth when we lived in England, to both of us together. And that was an awesome birth. It was really unique. I think that was your first C-section, right?
It was on Easter, if I'm correct.
Yes, it was Easter.
Yep. And we walked those halls for a very long time.
I think it was like 8 hours. Like
Yeah,
it was so long.
yes.
So quick birth story. I was in labor for like 28 hours and then I was like, I'm done with this. And then had this C-section. It was really great. And everybody was very happy. Like it was, I just remember the operating room was like very joyful and everybody was just happy. So
And you played Hamilton.
yes, we played Hamilton. Yes,
That's
during the birth. I still think about that when I
so
listen to
fun.
Hamilton. Yes, so fun. So I love that you remember that. That was like over 5 years ago. So
Yeah, I definitely, I swear every birth is like, I can tell you them so many minuscule details. They're just so fun.
So I am having you on today to talk about your very unique motherhood story, but also birth story of you being a surrogate. So I just want to dive in and just tell us how you came about to be a surrogate and what that has looked like in your motherhood and womanhood journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two kids of my own. I have an 11-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. And I had two very different births with them. I had a very long 34-hour labor with my son, and I had a very short 3-hour labor with my daughter. So it was like two opposite ends of the spectrum. Those births actually led to me becoming a birth and postpartum doula. And so it was just this feeling of like I had these crazy births and I wanted to know how to do better and more. And I didn't want to go through another birth, but at the time, I really wanted to know how to better support people because I didn't understand what the heck I was doing. I was like, everybody gives birth, you just do it. So I became a doula, started supporting moms through labor and delivery. And once I really figured out and got like my footing in being a doula and understanding birth so well, I realized like I really want to do this again. But I did not want more kids. And so for the longest time, I always used to say, like, I wish I could just take over for my clients and just let them rest and I could birth for them. And so I became best friends with a birth photographer in England, and she had been through an infertility kind of journey of her own. And rewind a little bit, while I was in Clovis, I had two very close friends that went through just heartbreaking infertility journeys. One of them had like 8 miscarriages, multiple ectopics. Another one, again, like countless miscarriages, ectopics, ended up pregnant with twins, lost one of her twins, like just really heartbreaking stuff. And I know that I am what I say fertile myrtle. It's kind of a not great term, but it's just true. But I didn't want it. I had my tubes tied after my daughter was born and she was 3 months old. I was very sure. Also made my husband get a vasectomy. We were very sure that we did not want more kids. So we kind of like went through this process where I knew I didn't want more kids, but I hated that I had the ability to have children so easily and it was going to go to waste. So through the doula infertility world that I was exposed to, the next best thing that I kind of opened my eyes to was surrogacy. Like, oh, I always say that it was the only way I could gift my surrogacy, the only way I could gift my fertility in a box to someone is by being a surrogate. And because I really did, like, if I could just give it to somebody, I would. And so it was kind of through a friend of mine who had a friend that was a surrogacy case manager. So I started talking to her. I was in England, but being in England, you cannot be a surrogate unless you're this surrogacy in the UK is very, very complicated. So being a US citizen in the UK, I could not be a surrogate. So I had another year and a half left in England. So I spent all of that time just researching, figuring out everything, what agency I wanted to work with, all of the stuff. And so it was like within 3 days of being back in the US, I had my application in and I was like ready to go. I knew I wanted to do it. I understood what the process, I knew what the process, what to expect for that. So I started on the journey of becoming a surrogate with an agency. And it was kind of interesting. So you get to pick who you match with. And I kind of set up, I was like, I'm open for anyone. I'll do international, local, I don't care, anyone. And so I met the first couple and they were an older couple. They were almost 60. Uh-huh. And then they sent me a second match, which was a single woman who wanted to be a mother in China that did not speak English. So I had an interpreter and she had a translator, and it was like very difficult to connect. So I went through this major panic after meeting both of them of being like, one, how do you choose who you're going to carry for? Because I'm like, who am I to say that the 60-year-old couple isn't qualified? I don't know. So we went like around and around about this. And then I kind of had this crisis where I'm like, I think I over romanticized surrogacy and it's not going to be this like amazing connection feeling. And I really was not certain. And I got really shaky and I told the agency, like, I need a little bit of time. I'm nervous. So my daughter at the time was dead set on getting bangs. She really wanted bangs. She was like, that was her goal at the time. So I took her we had just moved back home for the first time in 4 years since living in England. We moved back home and I took her to my husband's old high school friend who was a hairdresser in the area to get bangs. And it was like a week after this matching fiasco had happened. And so I was just venting to her about it and telling her about my story. And she was like, man, that's so funny. This is the second time this week I've heard about surrogacy. And I was like, really? And she said, yeah, my mom, who also cuts hair in the same salon as her client's niece is looking for a surrogate. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's, what are the odds? How funny. And so then whatever, we kind of moved on, didn't talk about it. And later that evening, she messaged me and said, hey, can I put you in contact with this woman? Maybe you guys can just talk. Like, I think she's really trying to figure out how to find a surrogate and you can maybe help guide her and where to look and things like that. Not once, I don't know why, not once in my mind did I think about like, oh, I might want to match with this person, but I was like, oh yeah, I can help her. I know I've done tons of research. I've been doing this for 2 years. So we set up a phone date, and my intended mother's name is Shay, and she and I set up a phone date and talked. And when I got on the phone with her, she's like, no, we had a surrogate that ended up backing out at the last minute. And then we got another surrogate and that fell through. So like, we're really just super devastated and looking for someone to carry our baby. Would you be interested in meeting with me? And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I thought you just wanted advice. I didn't know you were gonna, kind of propose me to be your surrogate. And so she was like, well, if you're not comfortable with it, it's okay. I understand. And I said, no, let's meet. And I said, then she's a heterosexual couple. So her husband, she said, how about you and I meet? And then from there, if things feel good, me and my husband can meet you and your husband. So she met with me and I met with her and her mom. Her and her mom are very close. And it was like, I just knew from that moment, I knew it was that moment of like, yes, this is who I'm supposed to carry for. We had similar views. We were similar personality, like just really, really, really hit it off. Um, but the caveat was she didn't really want to go through an agency. She was pursuing it independently, which I did not think I wanted to do at the time. And so I was very nervous about that. And I talked to my husband. I went home and I was like, I love her. She's perfect. She's everything I want. Like, it's just great. She's motivated, all the things. And I said, but she's independent. And I don't know, like asking her to go through an agency does cost her more money. So that's difficult. But I just don't feel confident enough to do it without an agency. And my husband said, why don't we just look into independent surrogacy and become more knowledgeable on that? And then maybe this is the right decision. And so we did. We decided to kind of look into it further. And then we did the meeting with her and her husband and me and my husband. And the bromance that developed between those two men is unreal. So it really became like the coolest little relationship. What's really funny is when I talked to her later and him, they told me the story of the last three people they had talked to about surrogacy and being their surrogate was all single. So when I was married, he was like, oh, this is a whole nother aspect that I never thought of. Like there's going to be another man involved that has feelings and what happens if he's not comfortable with me. And it was like this whole, he was really nervous about it. And then when they met, they just hit it off. So it was very reassuring to him. Um, so yeah, things kind of took off quickly. They only had one embryo. And so they had one shot and it was nerve-wracking knowing that. And now actually doing what I do, a lot of surrogates won't match with a couple that only has one embryo. And so that was another thing that was kind of hard for them was they just had the one and they weren't sure that they were going to try and make more. So we got really lucky. It took on the first try and this pregnancy went really smoothly. And then, yeah, I carried in 2021 through 2022. I delivered in August of 2022. I call her my belly buddy. And she has a name. She calls me Mamaya. They really went back and forth. And it's funny because so you try to avoid referring to the surrogate as mother in any way. So an old terminology is surrogate mother, which we're kind of as an industry trying to move away from. So it's usually gestational carrier or gestational surrogate. And so they were kind of going back and forth and said, hey, how would you feel about us having her call you Mama Mariah? And I was like, like I'm not in any way, shape, or form. It was 100% their embryo. Her egg, his sperm created an embryo that was not genetically related to me at all. And so I just kind of really struggled with the mama, and I was like, I'm not sold on it. And so then they were like, well, we can just have her call you aunt, or and we kind of just kept playing around. And one day her mom, my belly buddy's grandma, said she would keep saying Mama Mariah by accident. And then she'd say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And then one day she was like, Mamaya, wait, what about Mamaya? And so it just stuck. And so now she calls me Mamaya and she is 2 and adorable as ever. And yeah, they're doing great.
I love hearing your story. Okay, I want to back up because I know that people are like, how does this all work? What did your
Right.
husband think? So I want to hear, what did your husband think first, like with your idea of being a surrogate? I know he's like super supportive of you, but can you give us like a little behind the scenes of like how he felt about you doing this?
Absolutely. So when I first brought it up, he laughed at me and said I was crazy. Um, and then I kind of like let it sit for a couple days, and then I brought it up again, and I was like, what do you really think about this? And he kind of looked at me and was like, oh, you're serious. Oh, you're being serious. Okay. And then he had all the normal questions, how are you going to feel? Is the baby going to be your genetics? All of the things that honestly, anytime I tell any single stranger on the street, these are all the same questions they have. And So once he kind of really got through all of that, he went and took some time on his own to kind of think about it and look it up and have more questions. And then once I really started researching the process and filling him in on all of it, he was totally on board. But definitely first knee-jerk reaction was, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I always say that my selfish reason for doing this, which my intended mother, Shay, always gets mad at me because she says, you don't get to say you're selfish. But my selfish reason for doing this was after becoming a doula and supporting all these people through deliveries. I really had this like, I want to go through birth again moment, but I don't want more kids. So then this was my answer. This was, I got to be selfish and go through birth again, and I got to give away my fertility somehow, and it was great. So that was my selfish reason.
So is the embryo transfer kind of similar to like an IVF type of transfer? Like you go through a fertility doctor, they like they insert the embryo into your uterus and then you wait a certain amount of time to see if the embryo took. Is that how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So you do go through IVF. You just don't go through an egg retrieval. So there is also just a caveat to this. There is traditional surrogacy. That is where the surrogate uses her own egg, and it is actually an IUI situation. So the sperm is then implanted and she becomes pregnant with a baby that is half her genetics. That is really not done, not widely practiced. And the legal implications in many states are they're not great. So whenever I'm talking about surrogacy for the whole podcast, I'm talking about gestational surrogacy. And that is where an embryo is created on the outside of the egg is either a donor or the intended mother's, and then the sperm is either a donor or the intended father's. The embryo is created and then frozen at 2 weeks, 4 days. And so they also do what's called PGT testing on it, which is genetic testing to ensure that the embryo is genetically normal and won't grow with any kind of abnormalities that would not let it grow to viability or not let it survive once it is born. So yeah, the embryo is frozen and the surrogate will go through IVF from the point after an egg retrieval, basically just preparing her body. The medication protocols are different from clinic to clinic, but for the most part, you go through, kind of suppression of your own eggs from producing. And then you start injections for, you do estrogen and progesterone, and those are just like prepping you. And basically you get your body prepared and hormonally equivalent to 2 weeks, 4 days pregnant. They thaw the embryo, and then on the date of the embryo transfer, your body thinks you're in that cycle hormonally, and then we implant the embryo into the uterus. And then hopefully you continue doing hormone injections for 10 to 12 weeks, and they're daily. And so then the placenta actually develops around 7 weeks and starts taking over. So usually by about 10 weeks, you see a huge spike in hormone. And that's when you realize, oh, the placenta has taken over. You can go ahead and stop your synthetic hormones at that point. So
That is really interesting. I did not know about, I mean, I've talked to a lot of friends about their IVF journey, but I didn't know about this part. And I know that some friends after they get the embryo implants, like they stop doing like progesterone injections or things like that if they are low in that, but I didn't know exactly how it worked with the surrogate. So how did you feel about that? Did you think like, I'm totally cool with this? Was it kind of uncomfortable? Were you like ever like, oh, were you sick? Like, how does your body take pregnancy?
so pregnancy, I'm gonna say pregnancy and synthetic hormones are two different beasts, man. Like, I don't know what it is. Synthetic hormones really can change, and some people don't care. My old surrogacy director loved being on estrogen. I loved being on progesterone. Like, when I have progesterone in my body, I feel like I am a goddess made with gold through her veins. I'm like energetic and like in great mood, and I love how I feel whenever progesterone is coursing through my veins. So I definitely was more sick with my surrogacy pregnant, more nauseous, I should say. Not really all the way through, but nauseous all the time. The embryo transfer itself is very, I mean, it's like equivalent of, I would even say less than a pap smear. Like, it's probably around that. It's not really, it's invasive, but it's not really invasive, which sounds funny, but, and so, yeah, the The biggest, I think, annoyance is the progesterone injections. It's progesterone in oil. So it's a very thick injection, and it hurts. And it is a very long and very large needle. So you have to do those nightly, and you have to rotate each side, and you have to do it right on top, right on your butt. And it hurts. And you do it for 10 to 12 weeks. And so you get knots. At one point I hit a nerve and then could not use my right leg for like 3 days because it just stopped working and was hurting so bad. So that was annoying. But you learn the tips and tricks. You can like heat up the oil in the vial, so that way it's thinner whenever you inject it. You put a heating pad on before, so your muscle is warm and receives it better. You use a massage gun to work out the knots. So once you kind of get that figured out, it's not so bad, but it definitely, I think every surrogate counts down like, oh, 5 more days, 4 more days till I'm done. So yeah, that was probably the biggest annoyance with it.
How did your husband do with like supporting you through that process? Like, did you feel like he understood like what this meant? Because it is different when it's not like your baby. It's for this other couple. Like, how did that go emotionally for you guys working together as a team?
For sure. He was he was not at the embryo transfer, actually. My intended mother drove me and she was there with me. And neither the intended father didn't go either. He was not sure how to feel about the whole thing. Or maybe he met us there. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was like, he didn't really know his place either. And so my husband was like, no, this is a you guys thing. Just, let me know if you're knocked up after, was the joke. And so he did great. He did my injections for a little bit until we had a incident. And he got really nervous giving me an injection one night, and I flinched, and needle was already in. He pulled it out, and I said, "No, don't pull it out." And then he shoved it back in. And after that, I was like, "Oh, we're done. We're done." And poor thing, he was just so nervous because it's a huge needle and it's very strange. So after that, I did my own injections, but he was very, very supportive, very involved. Not every husband is, and not everybody has a partner, but he was very much part of the process.
So I want to jump forward to your birth and what you did to you have had all this birth experience helping other women through their labors and birth. So I want to hear about what the birth you wanted, how it actually went, and your support team through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually my plan the whole time was to have a birth center birth. And my intended mother was super on board. We had a great birth center locally. And then about halfway through, she got a little nervous about the birth center. I think mainly it was because for so long, this was kind of like a conceptual idea, like, oh, I'm going to have a surrogate and she's going to get pregnant and you're planning for it. But then when you're actually doing it and it's actually happening, it's like, oh, hold on. There is my actual child that is 20 weeks old inside of this woman, and she's going to deliver it somewhere. And all of a sudden, things can feel really real and scary. And so she got a little nervous about the birth center. So we ended up pivoting the plan to delivering at a hospital. And hindsight 2020, I'm so glad it happened the way that it did at 20 weeks, because at the end of my pregnancy, we went through for a ultrasound when I was like 39 weeks and 4 days. And at that ultrasound, they told me, you have 0 amniotic fluid left and you're being induced immediately. Please drive straight from here to the hospital. And had I not, so that would have disqualified me for delivering at the birth center. I would have had to go to a hospital. Had I not set up my plan and everything at 20 weeks, I wouldn't have had the midwife I had, who was phenomenal. I would not have known my team. I would not have been able to really kind of have a say in my delivery. So at the end, it was really great that that's how it ended up working out.
This ends part 1 in a 4-part series about surrogacy. In the next episode, we'll hear part 1 of Mariah's intended mother Shay's story as she recounts her journey of infertility and choosing to become a mother through surrogacy. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.